Hey guys, Sniper here with Zooka Training School, and so today we're going to talk all about shocks. Now, shocks can be one of the most powerful weapons in the game. They neutralize defenses of your choice and make it so that it's as if they weren't ever even there. For Zooka play, where every volley really counts for a lot, maximizing the effectiveness of your shocks can have a very significant impact on the amount of damage that your troops can do. Shocks are expensive, and even a high GBE player is normally limited to 6 or fewer shocks. So take a look at this chart. Shocks start at 7 energy, and each subsequent bomb adds another 5 energy to the cost. So if you look at the total cost column, you can see that by the time you get to 6 shocks, that costs more than twice the energy than 4 shocks would. So keeping your shocks to around 4 or below is ideal. Now I would say probably 3 to 5 shocks is standard for massive attack. So normally you'll have a mission that requires 4 to 5 shocks, giving you 1 round or 10 seconds of free fire on your target. Or you could have a mission that requires 2 shocks, and you'll normally do like a 2x2, giving you 20 seconds of fire on that target. Carefully planning your shock location and timing is a major key to elegant Zooka play. So let's get into the anatomy of a shock in a second, but right now I want you to take a look at this point here in Minotaur and start thinking about what your plan would be if this was you. So you're going to reach the target up there, and the goal here is to take out these 4 rocket launchers. Now obviously we'll continue to smoke up this path, and then we'll want to maximize the time our Zookas have once they come out of smoke. So what are we going to shock? Well, we're out of range of all the defensive structures except for the rocket launchers. And there's 19 launchers that we have to think about. So first of all, we'll take care of these 4 by carefully positioning our Zookas within their inner range boundary. That way we don't have to worry about them at all. And that leaves 15 more. Now, think about this. If you were going here, how would you shock those guys? So we could use 6 shocks like this, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or if we're a bit smarter, we could cut that down to 4 like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Saving 2 shocks saves a lot of gunboat energy that can be turned into critters or smokes for positioning. But let's get into the details to find the optimal shock placement. So you can visualize the playing field as a grid, using the size of a mine as one grid space. Now sometimes they're called tiles. Defensive structures take up 3x3 tiles. Now in order for a structure to be shocked, it only needs to have a single grid space intersected by the shock boundary. You don't need to completely envelop the structure for it to be neutralized. So this is where it becomes important to know that the diameter of a shock is exactly 6.4 tiles. That means that if you draw a line across the widest part of the shock circle, that line is 6.4 tiles long. Now, because defensive structures are 3x3 tiles, it makes it really easy to shock 2 or 3 that are right next to each other. And it also means that if you're very precise, you can get more than that. So look at these 4 structures that are packed together in a line. If you shock right in the center, you can actually get all 4 because the perimeter of the shock actually extends just barely beyond the center 2 defenses. You get 2/10 of a tile on either side. This kind of shock requires so much precision that you'll have to weigh the risk versus reward if you try to do this in an op, because an error margin of 1/5 of a tile is very small, and the consequences of missing can mean that your attack completely fails. Now that we understand this, we can see that the banks of 6 rockets can be neutralized with 1 carefully placed center shock. And that takes care of all 12 of these rockets with just 2 shocks. Okay, so let's tackle the remaining 3. Now, the safest way to get these is to use 2 shocks here and here. But if we do the math, we find that with extreme precision, all 3 can be taken out with 1 shock. The perimeter just barely touches the edge and corner tiles. So far, this is the hardest shock that I have attempted successfully in the entire game. And honestly, it's probably a bad idea to attempt something like this during an op, but you'll have to decide that for yourself. So if you go for something like this, you have to zoom in as far as possible and tap your shock point with a really steady finger. So now we know that we can neutralize all 15 rockets with only 3 shocks instead of a potential 6 that somebody might try. And that's a difference of 81 gunboat energy, which we can now use for smoke and critters or more shocks for extra time for the Zookas to do damage. Now, the other issue is timing. A maxed shock bomb will shut its target down for 10 seconds. Zooka fire only once every 2 seconds, so you'll have a maximum of 5 volleys before the shocks wear off and your troops can be targeted by the defenses. So that makes every second count. Now, because of this, I always recommend sending the furthest shocks first because they will travel for a longer time to reach their destination. If you work your way from furthest to closest to the gunboat, then your shocks will all land more closely together and therefore expire more closely together, which maximizes your Zooka's attacking time. For difficult shock missions, playing on a tablet can be really helpful. I usually get my Zookas safely to their destination, then zoom the screen as closely as I can to still include every shock point that I have to hit. And then using both hands, I carefully place my 2 index fingers over the first 2 shock points and watch the smoke timer run out. Then when it's time to send them, I send the first 2 and then move on to the next shock targets immediately. To learn the timing, it's going to be different on every base because it depends, of course, on how far the target is from your gunboat. But as a general rule, for massive attack maps that are kind of close to the back, usually the shock is sent around 75 to 85% completion. On ones that are really far back, it might be closer to 65 or 70. So there you go, guys. I hope you learned a lot about shocks and how you can maximize the efficiency of your Zookas.